Trevor came over, rolling his wine glass between his fingers. He didn't touch the chair, just shot it a look of barely concealed disgust, like spotting a cockroach on his marble kitchen floor. He spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. Frank, I know you mean well, but honestly, those chairs are wrecking the backyard. I don't want my friends thinking we're skimping on patio furniture. Amelia stepped forward and laid a hand on his arm, not to hold him back, but to agree. She looked straight at me. That usual sweet smile was gone, replaced by a cold annoyance. Dad, she said, flat and clipped. Someone living rent-free in someone else's house should be grateful for a place to sit. You are making us uncomfortable. Please, just stop. I bet 99% of you will hear this, sigh, and scroll past without clicking like or subscribe. Even if it only takes a second. What time is it for you, and where are you listening? November air in suburban Connecticut had that crisp, clean bite to it, the kind that promises pumpkin pie and football. From my spot on the back porch, I could smell damp maple leaves mixed with the roast turkey turning in my daughter Amelia's $5,000 oven. Their backyard was a perfect stage. They had a lawn so immaculate it looked like a roll of emerald turf imported from Ireland. But I, a man who has spent his life working with the real thing, knew what perfection cost. Constant watering, chemicals, and the merciless ripping out of anything that dared be different. Just like their life. I sat in one of the 6 Adirondack chairs I'd hauled over that morning. I'd made them all summer in my shop from the red cedar I handpicked, the back curved just so, the arms wide enough to hold a beer and a book. They were sturdy, they were honest, they embodied everything I believed in. And they stuck out here like a truth in a room of lies. Around me was a sea of J. Crew suits and glinting, expensive watches catching the late light. Men, friends of my son-in-law, Trevor, clustered around the outdoor bar, talking about mutual funds and ski plans in Vail. Their wives chattered about a new yoga instructor or a private preschool that had high tuition. I felt like an artifact from another era, a handcrafted screw among a box of mass-produced bolts. I'd been living here 2 years, in the basement room, they had kindly remodeled for me after Eleanor, my wife, passed. You can't be alone in that big house, Amelia had said then. Her hug felt hollow, a performance for the neighbors on the porch. All bone and expensive perfume, not a hint of warmth. Trevor came over with a glass of red wine that looked like it cost more than my best table salt. He was a real estate broker, one of those men whose smiles are wider than their financial futures. His laugh was a shade too loud, too bright. It was the sound of someone trying to paper over a deep crack in the foundation. He slapped the back of my chair with an ownership he had no right to. A rough, loud pat that announced, "This is my territory, everything in it, even you." "Frank, thanks for bringing these chairs," he said, loud enough for his buddies to hear at the bar. "Very rustic. Next time, let me handle it. I'll rent a few pieces from Restoration Hardware so it matches." A few of his friends chuckled. Rustic. The word felt like a diagnosis. Respond? What for? Turn their little get-together into a neighborhood circus? No. The silence of a woodworker weighs more than any shouted rebuke. I simply nodded and tried to shape a smile. Then I saw my grandson Leo looking at me with wide eyes. For him, and him alone, I swallowed the curse bristling in my throat. Amelia glided over like a queen in her realm. She wore a cashmere dress, the color of cream that cost more than the first month's rent on my old place with Eleanor. She placed a hand on Trevor's shoulder, an affectionate look, the kind that actually managed control. She smiled at the guests, the sort of smile that never reached the eyes. "Trevor, what are you saying? Dad's only giving what he can," she said. Then she turned to me. Her voice stayed sweet, but there was an iciness beneath it, sharp as broken glass. "Besides, if you're not buying the turkey, you shouldn't be complaining about the seat, right, Dad?" And then the silence fell. It wasn't ordinary quiet. It was an awkward hush that swallowed the party. The kind of silence loud enough that you could hear the judgments forming in people's heads. The music seemed to shrink. The sizzle from the grill drifted away. Even Trevor's rich friends suddenly found their designer sneakers fascinating. I saw old Mrs. Gable next door, pretending to deadhead roses, stop and stare. I wondered what story she was telling herself, happy family Thanksgiving or a carefully rehearsed play. She was the audience. We were the actors who'd missed our cues. I watched my daughter again. The face I used to wipe clean of tears. The one I'd read bedtime stories to. Now it was the face of a stranger. A stranger who had just priced me out of the room and decided I wasn't worth as much as a turkey. For a moment, I saw Eleanor standing in the corner of the yard beside the lilac tree she loved. She didn't speak. She just shook her head, a fathomless sadness in her eyes. She knew, as I did, that a crack had opened. Cracks in families like this don't heal on their own. They widen until everything collapses. I said nothing. I sat in my cedar chair, feeling the honest grain under my fingers. For the first time that day, I didn't just look, I began to observe. I realized I'd been here 2 years, but today I really started to pay attention. I started with Trevor, the way he always hit his phone screen when Amelia came near, the little flinch when a notification chimed. There are secrets in this perfect house, and I, an old carpenter they dismissed as useless, suddenly felt a new purpose. I would find them. I couldn't sleep that night. Amelia's words cut me deeper than any splinter. My basement room, nicely finished now with expensive rugs and a flat-screen TV, suddenly felt like a tomb. Upstairs, they creaked across the floor. Their laughter filtered down, distant and strange. I was no longer part of this family. I was a non-performing asset. I sat up and switched on the little desk lamp. Its warm yellow light fell across my tools, hanging on the wall, the only things in this house that truly belonged to me. Then, my eye landed on a small oak box on the shelf. It was one of the first things I'd made for Eleanor, for her to keep small, important things in. Under a few worn photographs and Amelia's birth certificate, there it was. A dark blue leather ledger, its corners soft with use. Eleanor had been a meticulous bookkeeper. She believed in numbers and the irrefutable truth of what was written down. She used to tell me, "Frank, never trust memory, trust what's written." That ledger was her legacy. It taught me to be careful. Tonight, I needed that carefulness more than ever. I set the book on the workbench. The smell of old leather and ink was comforting. I turned to the first page. Eleanor's neat hand-recorded dates and the very first loan we'd made to Amelia to buy a car after graduation. Everything was written down. After she died, I kept the habit, not because I didn't trust my daughter, but because it made me feel like Eleanor was still here. Under a lamp, the entries stopped being memories and became evidence. I measure my outlays the way I measure a plank of oak exact, down to the millimeter. The 10th of May 2023. $50,000 down payment on a house. I remembered that call. Amelia, breathless with excitement. "It's just a loan, Dad. We'll pay you back once Trevor's new real estate company takes off." I looked at the kitchen with the marble counters the same way I always do. Now the kitchen, the last of my retirement bonus put in. "Finally, a place of our own," she told her friends. "Never a place Dad bought for us." The 17th of January 24, $25,000 private school tuition for Leo. "We want the boy to have the best start, Dad," Amelia said, her voice sweet. Each ledger entry was like a cross-section of a tree, each ring telling a season. One thick ring for a good year, money for Leo's schooling. A thin ring from the year Eleanor fell ill, property taxes. I hadn't just given them money. I'd given them years of my life. The 2nd of September 2024, $15,000 cash flow issue. Trevor called for this one. "Just temporary, Frank. The market's softening. Need a little to cover payroll." He sounded confident, like asking someone to pass the salt at dinner. I turned page after page. Money for a new roof. Money for a 10-day ski trip to Aspen. For networking, Trevor said. Money for a new BMW. After Amelia's old car had trouble, I took out my old handheld calculator and began to add. The cold truth showed up on the little LCD screen. $187,500. I leaned back and let the number burn on my retinas. Nearly $200,000 in under 3 years. I know Trevor's a realtor, but this neighborhood isn't Beverly Hills. Business can be good, but not that good. Not that it swallows that kind of money and still begs for more. It was like trying to build a 3-story house on a foundation fit for a tool shed. Something didn't add up. Then I remembered. 6 months ago, I'd been in the kitchen making coffee while Trevor came in talking on his phone. He saw me and lowered his voice, turned away, but I heard enough. Something about high risk, high reward, and the project in the Caymans. At the time, I shrugged it off as business jargon I didn't understand. Now, in the quiet of the basement, the words Cayman Islands tolled in my head like an alarm. That's not where you go to build houses. That's where people go to hide things. I closed the ledger. The initial sting of hurt had faded into a clear, cold focus. I had the numbers. I had questions. Now I needed proof. Cayman Islands. A warm-sounding name for a place that holds icy secrets. I knew where to start. Not with Trevor's smooth talk, but with the things he discards. I looked toward the door. Outside, the blue recycling bin sat waiting for the morning pickup. At midnight, in the rich neighborhood's quiet, truth often sits at the bottom of a blue bin, and I was ready to go look for it. There's a particular kind of silence at 2 in the morning in a wealthy neighborhood. It isn't the hush of nature, it's the quiet you buy with expensive alarm systems and thick walls. That night, that bought silence was on my side. I waited until I heard Trevor's steady snoring from the bedroom upstairs. I slipped into my dark work clothes, pulled on the leather gloves I use in the shop, and eased out through the basement door. The cold air woke me up. Eleanor would never have approved of this. She would have called it prying, improper. But she also would never have let a liar steal from her family. Sometimes, to protect honor, you have to do things that aren't very honorable. The blue recycling bin stood sentinel at the end of the driveway, a mute guard full of discarded secrets. I opened the lid gently. Inside was a jumble of Amazon boxes, empty wine bottles, and glossy real estate magazines. I worked quickly and methodically, like arranging tools in the shop. My hands sifted through the worthless stuff until I felt it. A thicker stack of papers, carelessly torn into quarters. I brought my prize back to the basement. Under the desk lamp, I pieced the fragments together on the workbench. It was an American Express platinum statement, whole pages reassembled. The name on it, Trevor Black. I'm no financial expert, but I can read a bill. There were charges for lunches at Zinc in New Haven on days Trevor told Amelia he was stuck in meetings in Hartford. A nearly $2,000 charge at a high-end jeweler, not something Amelia had ever been given. But the thing that caught my eye most was a recurring monthly payment. $5,000 to a company called Clear Path Consulting LLC. Consulting fees. Trevor had never mentioned any consultant. He always boasted about being a lone wolf in business. The next morning I went out and pruned the bushes in the front yard, a hands-on job that clears the head. As I expected, Mrs. Gable, my neighbor with the flawless silver hair and eyes that miss nothing, walked by. "Morning, Frank," she said. "Sweet as ever. You're always so busy, not like some people." She paused, and I knew she was about to feed me a scrap of gossip. "I hate to bother you," she lowered her voice, "but did you notice that odd car parked at the end of the street? An old green Ford Mustang. It was there a few nights last week. Doesn't look like it belongs to anyone who lives here, Frank. It looks worried." I thanked her for the heads up and promised to keep an eye out. An old Ford Mustang. Noted. That afternoon, I was at Stop and Shop picking up a few things. At the deli counter, I overheard two women, probably members of Amelia and Trevor's country club crowd, whispering. "Have you heard anything about the Blacks?" One said. "I hear Trevor's real estate company is in trouble. Sue Parker's husband backed out of a deal. Says the numbers don't look right." The other sighed. "How sad. They live so well. What will Amelia do? She doesn't even know how to pump gas." I paid for my groceries, heart ticking a little faster. That wasn't idle chatter. It was another piece of the puzzle, handed to me beside the Swiss cheese. Back in the basement, I sat down and looked at what I had. A credit card statement with secret charges and a phantom consultant, a suspicious old Mustang prowling the street, and whispers about a shaky empire. The picture began to emerge the way wood grain appears under sandpaper. Trevor wasn't just spending wildly, he was lying about his finances. That Mustang? My bet is it wasn't a friend visiting, it was a creditor. And Clear Path Consulting, I had a feeling, wasn't a consulting firm at all. It was a shell. The credit statement was only the surface. The name Clear Path Consulting kept nagging at me. Then I remembered something. Trevor's old Dell laptop, the one he tossed into the backyard shed after buying a shiny MacBook Air. He assumed it was dead flickering screen, a dead battery, but I'm a craftsman. I don't only work wood. I tinker with machines. I suspected the soul of Trevor's lies might still be trapped inside that old machine, waiting to be woken up. The shed out back was Trevor's territory, a graveyard of impulse purchases, quickly forgotten, a nearly unused set of premium golf clubs, a dusty treadmill, and tucked in a corner, the old Dell laptop he tossed aside without a second thought. I brought it back to my woodshop, where I feel like I can take things apart and put them back together on my own terms. I set it on the bench and felt for a moment like a surgeon about to begin a difficult operation. Dust crusted the case, but under the spray-painted plastic, I knew there might still be a beating heart, a brain full of secrets. With the right screwdriver set, I began. I opened the bag, blew the dust from the cooling fan, checked the connections. The battery was shot, but that wasn't the problem. I have a universal power supply. The question was a hard drive. Did it still live? I hooked it up and plugged it in. A faint beep answered. Windows XP crawled onto the screen, slow and grudging, like an old man waking from a long sleep. Then the login prompt. Of course, passwords, but people like Trevor are too arrogant to imagine anyone would bother to look. He thought throwing the machine away was enough. He'd underestimated an old carpenter. I tried the most obvious combo, his wife's name and their boy. Amelia Leo 1. Enter. Welcome screen. I was in. It felt like stepping into an abandoned house. The desktop background was a frozen lie, a happy family shot from Disney World. I went straight to work, past family photos, music, and movie folders. I headed into my document. There were the numbers, a stack of Excel sheets labeled Q2 forecast, Q3 plan, but they weren't about real estate projects. There were spreadsheets of sports betting sites, BetMGM, DraftKings, rows of red numbers, losses, tabulated, $5,000 on the Patriots, $10,000 on the Yankees. He was burning money, my money. I dug deeper into saved emails. There were messages from credit card companies' warnings about maxed limits. Then a string of emails from an unnamed address, just a handle. Johnny be good. The tone wasn't friendly. Trevor, you kidding me? Deadline's Friday. I don't care about your market slowdown. If I don't see the money, I'll come to your office. Or maybe I'll drop by your place and tell your pretty wife about your expensive hobbies. Don't think you can slip away. I know that old Mustang pisses you off. Consider it a reminder I'm always close. The Mustang. Mrs. Gable's odd car. Not a coincidence. A vulture circling. I thought that was the worst of it. I was wrong. I found a hidden folder nameless. Curious, I opened it. It was empty, except for one subfolder. Project X. I'd been looking for financial fraud. Spreadsheets, off-book accounts, bad investments. But when I opened that folder, the numbers vanished. Only photographs remained. Dozens of them. A young woman, half Trevor's age, blonde and smiling in a sunlit penthouse, exactly the kind of place Amelia always dreamed of. Then PDF invoices from Tiffany & Co., Neiman Marcus, and voice files, voicemails loaded with things a husband should never say to anyone but his wife. Steel rusts, wood rots, but betrayal doesn't fade. The anger in me was not a hot flame. It was a hard shard of ice. And then I found it. The last piece. The trump card. A PDF named Lease Agreement. The lease for the penthouse in those photos. Under the woman's name, a girl named Candace. Rent, $5,000 a month. And the payor, Clear Path Consulting LLC. The very name that showed on Trevor's credit card statement. Not a consulting firm at all. Rent. Start date. Le 10 à 7 mai 2023. 1 week after I handed Trevor $50,000 for a deposit on a big real estate project. The big project, it turned out, was her. I leaned back in the shop chair, the air in the basement suddenly thin. He wasn't just a gambler or a liar. He was a parasite. He'd been living off my money, off what I sacrificed, funding a double life, while my daughter, my own child upstairs, believed she'd married a prince. I could blow the whole thing open right now, print it all, lay it on the kitchen table, and watch their perfect life explode. But the shrapnel would hit innocence, Leo, little Chloe, even Amelia. No matter how she treated me, she's still my daughter. No, a good carpenter never uses a sledgehammer when a chisel will do. I won't demolish their house. I'll take it apart, nail by deceitful nail. I need a plan. A plan not just to punish Trevor, but to save Amelia from herself. And to do that, I need an ally, someone who also has reason to want the scales tipped back to right. I know exactly who to call. I shut the old computer down. My woodshop, my refuge, suddenly felt tainted by the secrets I dug up. The smell of cedar and linseed couldn't cover the stink of lies. I sat there a long time, staring at the black screen. I had the evidence now, an arsenal big enough to flatten the pretty life Trevor and Amelia had built. I could walk upstairs this minute, toss the file onto their marble kitchen table, and watch everything explode. I could see Trevor denying, Amelia panicking, tears, shouting, a quick, clean victory. And then what? Leo and little Chloe would be dragged into the storm. Amelia, however she'd hurt me, was still my blood. Destroying Trevor would destroy her, and it would ruin the grandchildren's future. Eleanor would never have wanted that. No, a good carpenter doesn't take a sledgehammer to a fine chair when a chisel will do. I wouldn't demolish this house. I would save it from the woodworm gnawing inside, and I could not do it alone. I needed someone with the same aim, someone who understood what honor cost. I'd met Arthur Black Trevor's father maybe 5 times. At the wedding, at a couple of Christmases. He was a quiet man, a retired lawyer with eyes that saw too much. Unlike his son, Arthur had nothing to prove. He wore well-made but old suits and spoke with careful restraint. I always had the sense he, like me, watched his children's performances with an anxious distance. I dug out his number from an old address book. My hand trembled a little as I dialed. This was a gamble. If Arthur sided with his son, my whole plan would collapse. Arthur Black speaking. His low, clear voice answered. I took a deep breath. Hello, Arthur. It's Frank Miller, Amelia's father. Sorry for the sudden call. Over the far time. A pause. I could hear a clock ticking on the other end. Frank, good to hear from you. Everything all right? Not really, I said, my voice steady. I think we need to talk about our children. Another, heavier silence. Then, without hesitation, he said, Atticus Cafe, downtown. Half an hour, Atticus was a quiet place, shelves of books, and the smell of roasted coffee. Arthur was there, reading a hardcover in the corner. He stood when I came in a polite gesture that felt like an old-world welcome. We shook hands. His grip was firm, reliable. We sat in silence for a beat. I didn't know how to start. Arthur broke the quiet. Is Amelia well, Frank? He asked, concern in his eyes, not accusation. She thinks she's well, I answered. Then I tested him gently. Trevor's business seems to be doing well. The house, the cars, they live nicely. Bought a Vade, I'll present a man. Arthur looked at me straight on, and in that moment I saw the burden of a father disappointed in his son. Frank, he said, voice dropping, I practiced law for 40 years. I know when someone comes to see me for anything other than small talk. He paused, stirring his coffee. My son was always looking for shortcuts. He wants the payoff without the work. That was the moment I knew I'd come to the right place. When he was 16, Arthur went on, staring into the distance. He stole money from his mother's purse to buy concert tickets. When I confronted him, he spun a complicated tale about bullies and extortion. He's always been good at stories. The trouble is, I stopped believing his stories a long time ago. I took a folded quarter sheet from my pocket, a printout of one of the email chains between Trevor and his mistress, an exchange that explicitly said Trevor would use the old man's investment to pay her rent. I slid it across the table. I didn't say a word. Arthur put on his glasses and read. His face showed no surprise, only a profound weariness, a sorrow carved into the lines around his eyes. He finished, removed his glasses, rubbed the bridge of his nose. He hasn't just betrayed your daughter, Frank. He's betrayed his name, he said, voice hoarse. He looked at me. I suspected for a while. Unexplained expenses, trips with no purpose. Thank you for confirming it. Ignorance isn't blessedness, it's complicity. He took a deep breath, and when he spoke again, the lawyer's steel returned. So what will we do to clean this up? Hope swelled in me. I was not alone. I don't want to destroy Amelia or the grandchildren, I said, but I can't let him go on. I agree, Arthur nodded. We cannot wreck her life. The job is to remove the snake from the garden without trampling the flowers. He thought a moment, fingers tapping the tabletop. There's a clause in one of Trevor's company charters about ethics and standards of conduct for officers. I put it there as a safeguard. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw a spark of fight in his eyes. And the company's annual board meeting is in 3 weeks. That will be our stage. The audience wouldn't be nosy neighbors. It would be Trevor's partners and investors. The revenge wouldn't be in their backyard, but in the boardroom. I nodded. The pieces were in place. There's a particular kind of quiet that only lives in the morning, the hour before the world straps on its usual armor. It's the quiet of coffee perking, of early sunlight slipping through the blinds, of plans being laid in silence. For me, a carpenter, newly retired mornings have always been for measuring, cutting, getting ready. Only today the material isn't wood. It's my daughter's future. I spend the night rehearsing, the tremor in my voice, the distracted glance, the vague worry of an old man who thinks the finish line is fading. I asked Amelia about their retirement fund, with a practiced little wobble in my tone. It was a performance, and a good carpenter knows how to build a convincing front. Your coffee smells best as always, Amelia, I said, when she set a warm ceramic mug in front of me. Their granite countertop gleamed in the morning, light a cold, perfect surface, like the life Trevor has built for my daughter. Amelia smiled, a bright smile with tired shadows at the edges of her eyes. I took a sip and let the heat spread. The bank sent a letter yesterday. I began, my voice even, as if telling a small, indifferent story. They've cut the interest on my retirement account again. Not much left now. Times are tough. Amelia frowned, and I waved it off, as if not to bother her. Oh, it's nothing major. I've got enough. It just makes me think. I tried for an ingenuous look. I wonder if you two have a solid backup plan? I mean, for the long haul of 401k or something? She brushed it aside exactly as I expected, the reaction I'd planned. Don't worry, Dad. Trevor's doing better than ever. He just closed a few big contracts. But I saw it, a flicker of anxiety in her eyes, as quick as a blink before she smoothed it into a reassuring smile, like a hairline crack in flawless glass. Invisible to most, but to the hand that made the glass it's as clear as daylight. The seed was planted. Now for the gardener. 20 miles away, in a quiet office overlooking an empty parking lot, Arthur was making his move. Arthur isn't a man of theater. His kingdom is words, clauses, rules printed in 12 point, Times New Roman. If I'm the carpenter, Arthur is the architect drawing plans down to the last screw. He was drafting the email to Howard Peterson, a Bill Corp board member. Peterson's old guard, conservative and cautious, a perfect target. Arthur's message was a study in subtlety, a polite check-in, a small note of concern about the company's breakneck expansion under Trevor. No accusations, no attacks, just a small seed of doubt planted in soil that was already tilled by prudence. 2 men in 2 cities, tightening a double vice. One psychological, one legal. That evening, the sound of our first domino wobbling came to me. I was in the study, pretending to watch a nature show, really listening. Amelia and Trevor were in the kitchen, whispers at first, then louder. I only asked, Trevor. Amelia's voice had strain. Another trip to Chicago? You were just there last week. That's business, Amelia. What, you want me to turn down a fat contract? Trevor's voice grew defensive, sharp, a sure sign of insecurity. Not that just, Dad's been odd lately. This morning he kept asking about our money, our retirement fund. I held my breath. This was it. Trevor gave a dismissive snort, all arrogance. He's an old man, Amelia. Old people worry about everything. Don't let it bother you. Everything's under control. His hubris, the perfect curtain for our plan. Trevor's certainty made him blind to what was unfolding right under his nose. I heard a chair scrape and his footsteps upstairs. A heavy silence fell over the kitchen. I sat in the dark, smiling. I waited another half hour, then took out my phone and dialed Arthur. Frank here, I said softly. Situation report. There's a first crack on the family front. Good, Arthur replied, calm and efficient as ever. Over here we have progress. Peterson answered the email. My heart kicked. And he wants an informal talk on Wednesday. He said he's had similar concerns. I closed my eyes and felt a cold satisfaction spread through my chest. Everything was unfolding exactly to plan. Arthur told me on the phone, Peterson wants to see full financials for the previous quarter. Trevor will have to present. He won't be able to hide anything. The board is set. Now we wait for the opponent to walk into the trap. I bet 99% of you will hear this. Sigh and scroll past without clicking. Like or subscribe, even if it only takes a second. What time is it for you, and where are you listening? The BuildCorp boardroom sat on the top floor like a glass box overlooking the city, skyscrapers rising outside like eternal growth charts. Inside, the air was chilled to a perfect, indifferent coolness, carrying the scents of fine leather, fresh coffee, and something less tangible but just as present, ambition. Around the long, glossy mahogany table, 12 board members sat like gods on Olympus, tailored suits as armor, silent tablets their weapons. This was a theater, and tonight Trevor O'Connell was the star. He stood at the lectern, bathed in bright light, more matinee idol than CEO. Trevor had a gift for this. He could turn a dry financial report into an epic about conquest and triumph. His slides, crafted by a top New York shop, flashed in bold color. Bar charts rose like the skyline beyond the windows. Buzzwords, disruptive growth, strategic market penetration, synergy optimization, filled the room with unshakable confidence. He was at the peak, a king surveying a prosperous realm. He did not know that two of his courtiers were sharpening daggers. Arthur Finch sat nearly invisible at one corner, saying nothing through the presentation, hands folded on the table. Beside him, Howard Peterson, silver-haired, perpetually skeptical, occasionally scribbled in a leather notebook. They were the quiet predators gliding in the warm, shallow water of complacency. And so, Trevor concluded with the million-dollar smile that had closed countless deals, I can confidently say, this quarter was not just a success, it's a springboard for BuildCorp's brilliant future. Polite but enthusiastic applause. Heads nodded, smiles all around. Everything was fine. Everything was on the rise. Trevor nodded his thanks. I'll take questions now, he offered. A hand rose slow, civilized, non-threatening. Arthur Finch. Arthur, Trevor said. Smile in place, go ahead. Arthur rose deliberately. Trevor, an excellent presentation. Really impressive. He paused, letting the praise settle. I have one small question, almost trivial. The unexpected marketing expenses in Q3 seem about 20% higher than forecast. I'm sure there's a good reason. Could you be more specific about the campaign or event that generated that cost? The question hung in the air. Polite, technical, entirely reasonable. For Trevor, it landed like the first pebble before an avalanche. His smile faltered. Oh yes, that line, he began, his voice losing a sliver of smoothness. That was part of a multi-platform campaign we launched to promote the Oak Haven project. A heavy digital push aimed at potential overseas investors. Upfront costs were a bit high, but the projected ROI should be significant over the next 2 quarters. A plausible answer, vague but acceptable. Most people nodded. Arthur stayed standing. Before he could sit down, Howard Peterson spoke, dry as always. Interesting you mentioned Oak Haven, Trevor, Peterson said, not looking at Trevor so much as at his notebook. Because I have a question about that project as well. According to the reports, we poured significant capital into land clearing and infrastructure in Q3. Yet a partner of mine drove past the site last week and said it still looks like a vacant field. No machinery, no activity. He joked that the weeds are growing faster than his portfolio. A few polite chuckles, then silence. The room tightened. All eyes turned to Trevor. Sweat beaded on his brow. Yes, Mr. Peterson, Trevor stammered. We ran into some minor issues with the local contractor. Permit delays, a little bureaucracy, totally under control. We expect to restart next month. Which contractor? Peterson asked immediately. What's the company's name? Silence stretched. Trevor blinked. I don't have a specific name here. My project lead is handling it. At that point, Eleanor Vance, a woman who usually stayed quiet, spoke up. But the unexpected marketing and the land clearance funds have already been dispersed, haven't they, Trevor? The money has left the company accounts, correct? Of course, Trevor said, his voice now edged with irritation. That's how business works. Then, Arthur said, Gently, but with a deadly weight. The money's gone, yet we don't know the contractor, and the marketing campaign seems to have produced no tangible results. It sounds like we're paying for promises. Things are. The dominoes began to fall. Questions multiplied from all corners. An obscure consulting fee paid to a Delaware company. Trips to Miami that don't match any itinerary. Small, odd transfers that hadn't been explained. Each question was another incision, exposing gaps beneath the glossy numbers Trevor had just presented. Trevor's confidence evaporated like morning mist. He was cornered, his face flushing. "Look," he pleaded, voice nearly begging. "The market is tough. Sometimes you have to make bold decisions. There are unreliable partners. This isn't my fault." His panic read as confession. He was no longer king. He was a liar unmasked. In the sudden, chaotic moment, Arthur Finch calmly pushed a thin blue folder toward the center of the table. "I don't wish to interrupt," he said into the abrupt hush. "But perhaps this document will clarify things. I happened to come across an independent appraisal of the Oak Haven land done by a third party just 2 weeks ago. The valuation here differs markedly from the numbers in Trevor's financials." Marcus Thorne, the chair, took the folder, slid on his glasses, and skimmed the first page. The room held its breath. Thorne's face betrayed nothing, but when he looked up, his eyes were as cold as ice. The meeting ended in taut silence. The decision was swift and merciless. "The board has voted," Marcus Thorne announced, his tone broken no opposition. "We will initiate a comprehensive independent audit of all financial operations over the past 6 months. Effective immediately, Trevor's executive authority will be suspended." Trevor stood motionless at the lectern beneath lights that suddenly felt cruel. His world collapsed before the 12 faces he worked so hard to impress. He packed up his laptop and papers without meeting anyone's eyes. The click of his briefcase closing sounded like a cell door. He left the room, taking with him a quiet that smelled of failure. I heard tires squeal on the road. A car door slammed like a gunshot. Then the front door flung open. The boardroom war was over. Now the battle at home would begin. I heard the collapse before I saw it. It began with a shriek of tires on asphalt, a sound too sharp, too urgent for a quiet Wednesday afternoon in the suburbs. Then the car door slammed. It wasn't an ordinary click. It was a gunshot, the detonated noise of bottled-up fury. The front door flew open, slammed against the wall, and the little landscape print Amelia loved rattled on its hook. The boardroom war had ended. The fight at home was just beginning. Trevor burst in like a storm. His silk tie was askew, his shirt crumpled, and the face that everyone had once loved, the golden boy grin, was twisted now by anger and panic. Amelia came running from the kitchen with a dish towel in her hand. "Trevor, what's wrong? How was the meeting?" "The meeting?" he roared, a primitive sound from deep in his chest. He flung his leather case to the floor. The metal clasps clanged against the hardwood. The meeting was a trap, a setup. He paced the living room, raking his hands through his hair like a caged animal. "My father, that old he and that man, they set me up." His wild eyes darted down the hallway toward my door. Amelia was bewildered. "Your father? And my father? What did they do?" Trevor let out a barking, bitter laugh. "What did they do? They ruined me, turned me into a laughingstock. The questions were scripted, each one planted. Peterson, Arthur, the whole lot." He yelled and tossed things. A throw pillow sailed into the wall. A stack of magazines went sprawling. It was the tantrum of a spoiled child. I saw no broken man, only a fraud with his back to the wall. His fury found a new target. He turned on Amelia, his eyes rimmed red. "And you, didn't you see? You live here with him. Listen to him whisper those poison things. You let that snake into our home. Don't speak of my father that way." Amelia snapped, voice shaking. "Why not?" he screamed at her. "It's all his fault. Ever since he moved in, everything's gone downhill. He's a curse, a jealous country bumpkin jealous of what we have." Amelia looked over at me. I had stepped out into the doorway and stood there, silent. In her eyes there was a tug of war. Part of her still wanted to believe in her husband. "Dad!" Her voice held accusation. "What did you tell Mr. Finch? What are you doing? You're jealous of our success, aren't you?" I didn't answer. Words would have been futile. I walked past them to the glass coffee table where Trevor had kicked the magazines. Without ceremony, I set a slim beige file on the table. Silence filled the room. Trevor's rage evaporated into a brittle alertness. My calm was scarier than any shout. Amelia moved first, tentatively, as if the folder might be poisonous. She looked from me to Trevor and slowly opened the cover. On top was Trevor's American Express statement. I'd circled a few charges in red. A diamond necklace from Tiffany & Co., a dinner at Per Se, the very restaurant Amelia had dreamed of weekend bills at the Carlisle. Days matched the days he'd claimed to be away on business. What? What is this? Amelia whispered, voice breaking. Her face drained from flush to ashen. Give it here, Trevor bellowed, lunging to snatch the papers. I laid a steady hand on his shoulder. A firm, unyielding grip. Don't, I said the first words I'd spoken since this began. He froze. His aggression hissed out like air from a pricked balloon. I looked at my daughter. Tears welled. She sought an explanation, a denial. You're lying, she cried. But the accusation sounded thin and pleading. Trevor, tell me this is a mistake. Trevor couldn't speak. He had no answer. I took the statement from Amelia's trembling hands and let another document slide free beneath it. A lease for a luxury Upper West Side apartment. A 12-month tenancy signed in Trevor O'Connell's name and a woman's name that wasn't Amelia's. Ask him about the project at apartment 7B. Amelia, I said in a level voice. Ask why his name's on a lease with another woman. Ask where the deposit I gave for your dream home, the money I lent you, actually went. Refer. It cut deeper than anything else. Amelia staggered back, one hand flying to her mouth. The lease slipped from her fingers and fluttered to the rug. She stared at Trevor, the horror widening in her eyes, as if she were seeing him whole for the first time, the monster behind the charming mask. His world was disintegrating piece by piece in front of him. The husband she'd admired, the man she'd been proud to call her own, was not just a business fraud. He'd betrayed her. He'd spent my money, her dreams, on another life. No, she moaned, a sound that tore the room. No, no. She looked to me as if begging for a miracle, but she saw the truth in the calm of my gaze. Then she turned back to Trevor, who stood stripped bare, mute, and defeated. His silence was confession enough. The sob tore out of her one, then another. Her legs gave way. She crumpled onto the Persian rug, surrounded by the wreckage of their perfect life. Her cries filled the house, the sound of utter ruin. Trevor stood there, unable to soothe or explain. The storm died into a hollow silence and the ragged wailing of a broken heart. I watched my daughter collapse on the floor. My task was done. I had felled the poisonous tree, but I knew its roots had grown into her garden. Cleaning up the rest would be her work. Quietly, I returned to my room, packed a small suitcase, and left it by the door. It was time to walk away from a house built on lies. There's a particular kind of calm that comes with cleaning a house that's been left to itself. Dust is not merely dust. It is time that has settled. When I went back to the little house that belonged to Eleanor and me, the air was thick with memory and old wood. I threw every window open to let the crisp October breeze push out the stale air. I spent the first day simply cleaning and fixing small things, tightening a creaking hinge, changing a burned-out bulb over the sink, scrubbing a stubborn stain out of the basin. Each small task was its own kind of meditation, a way to sand down some of the rough edges inside me after everything that had happened. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt a weary unburdening, like finishing a marathon I never asked to run. A few days later, Arthur called. His voice over the phone was his usual steady, lawyerly calm, which made the news he brought all the more striking. The audit had been quick and merciless. Trevor's lies, clumsily wrapped in accounting jargon, were peeled away. He spoke of false invoices, phantom project funds, personal expenses hidden as company costs. The inevitable followed. The board had fired Trevor on the spot. BuildCorp was facing a major restructuring, and likely investor lawsuits. Arthur recited the facts with the cool objectivity of a man reading a report. When he finished, there was a pause. You did the right thing, Frank, he said. That was as close to praise from Arthur as I'd ever expect. I didn't hear Amelia's news from her. I heard it the way most news travels in a small town through the local surveillance network of neighbors. Mrs. Gable at the end of the street called under the pretense of checking on me, but really to pry and pass along gossip. She spoke with that syrup of faux sympathy. Poor Amelia. Frank. I saw a for sale sign in her yard this morning. Even that fancy SUV is gone. I hear she stepped back from the PTA. It's quite a collapse. I thanked her for her concern and hung up. I looked out over my woodshop where the late sun lit the sawdust into gold. Collapse, that's how the world would frame it. But I knew it wasn't a tragedy so much as the beginning of learning to stand on one's own 2 feet. She had lived too long in a house built on lies. Now she would have to build something, however small, that was hers and true. Every part of me wanted to rush over, write her a check, find her a lawyer, fix everything. Then I heard Eleanor's voice in my head, gentle and firm. Frank, sometimes the greatest love is to let your children learn to stand up after they fall. She was right. This was Amelia's lesson, not mine. About 2 weeks later, my phone buzzed. A message from an unrecognized number, but I knew whose it was. 3 simple words. You okay, Dad? I stared at the screen. In those 3 little words was a sea of regret, anger, hurt, and maybe a flicker of hope. I typed an answer, deleted it, typed another, deleted that too. If I replied too quickly, if I came on too strong, she'd retreat back into her shell. I set the phone down and went out to the shop. Those words needed space to breathe. A few days after that, I had reason to drive through Amelia's old neighborhood. I tried to avoid it, but some compulsion made me turn down the familiar street. The house was still there, the for sale sign awkward on the well-trimmed lawn. Then I saw her. Amelia was outside, pushing an old, labor-intensive lawnmower. Jeans, faded t-shirt, hair in a ponytail. She looked tired, thinner, not the beaming woman she used to be. But there was something else, a new steadiness in her face. Every push of that mower was deliberate. It was a task she used to hire out the kind of work Trevor had once deemed beneath them. Watching her do that honest, grunt work, I felt no pity. I felt a swell of pride. She was fighting. She was picking up the pieces in her own way. That afternoon, I picked up my phone. I knew what to say. I replied, I'm fine. I'm making some new Adirondack chairs this weekend. If you and the kids want to come by and see them, you're welcome. I hit send and put the phone down. I didn't sit there waiting, anxious for a reply. I laid out the invitation like a planed smooth. Whether she picked it up and built something new from it, that was entirely her choice. This time, the ball was in her court. I bet 99% of you will hear this, sigh, and scroll past without clicking like or subscribe. Even if it only takes a second, what time is it for you? And where are you listening? Saturday arrived with a quiet I hadn't felt in a long time. I sat on the back porch in one of the new Adirondack chairs. Coffee gone lukewarm in my hand, looking out over the garden Eleanor and I had tended for 40 years. Her rose bushes were still holding on, getting ready for the winter. I wasn't waiting for anything, exactly, but I was listening. Then I heard the tires slow, the gravel rasping as a car turned into the driveway. I stayed where I was. After a little while, Amelia came through the side gate with the kids, Mia and Leo. There was a small awkwardness in the air, as if they were visitors stepping into uncharted territory. Between us lay a space filled with unsaid things and still fresh hurts. Amelia looked different, not just because she wore plain jeans and a sweater, but in the way she carried herself, steadier, humbler than I'd ever seen her. Mia, shy as ever, hovered behind her mother. But Leo, 7 years old and all endless curiosity, ran straight to the new chairs. He circled one, little fingers gliding over the planed surface. This is like the one at Mom's old house, he cried, his clear little voice slicing through the tension. Amelia flinched at the boy's remark. She stepped forward and looked at the oak chair, the grain standing out in the morning light. She looked at it a long moment, as if seeing it for the first time. Then she looked up at me. For a second, I thought she might start crying, might say she was sorry. She didn't. Something better happened. It's beautiful, Dad, she said. Quiet but clear. Very solid. Solid. A small word, but it held everything: the worth of the chair, the durability of honest craft, and the mistake she'd made in once dismissing those things for flimsy shine. Something in my chest that I didn't even know was tightened began to loosen. She sat down with a soft exhale. "It's going to be hard coming up," she said, staring off. "I know," I answered. "But you'll make it. You're made of good wood." She smiled a real smile at last. Tired, but genuine. Leo had already lost interest in the chair and was staring at the open door of my woodshop. "Grandpa, what's in there?" he asked. "Want to see?" I said. He nodded so fast I thought his head would fall off. I stood and led him into my sanctuary. The smell of pine and linseed oil wrapped around us. I handed him a scrap and a small block plane, showed him how to push it, how to feel the grain under the blade, how to turn a rough face into something smooth. Amelia lingered in the doorway, arms folded, watching quietly. She didn't speak. A connection was forming not with words, but with action, with inheritance. The afternoon passed in that peace. The last image I carried from the day was Leo, sawdust on his face, concentrating as he tried to plane a straight edge. Amelia sat on the oak chair with a cup of tea, and for the first time in a long while she looked truly calm, as if some invisible weight had been set down. I watched them and thought, my legacy isn't in bank ledgers or big contracts. It's here in the smell of pine, in my grandson's delighted laugh when the curl of wood lifts from the plane, and in my daughter's quiet understanding. And that was enough.